it's bringing it back a little bit more again to post-development itself. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about how your thinking about post-development has changed, and if there have been particular people or texts or alternatives that also change your thinking. You've already touched upon it a bit, maybe, but maybe you could elaborate a bit more on that.
I think how my thinking about post-development changed. Well, first of all, I was just enthusiastic about it, and then I think the first change was when I got aware of these dangers of neo-populism, when I was reading the text of Ranema, that where I found some elements which could be seen as authoritarian, that we actually should trust the wisest people and not which seemed to me well, at that time I was considering this a strange substitute for democratic procedures. Just to trust the wisest and most experienced people, and I was reading Claude Alvarez and getting the feeling that well, everything Western is bad, and everything being part of a traditional Indian culture was good. And I was thinking, well, I'm not sure about this culture thing, because if in analogy, I mean, those people telling of us about the dangers of the West here in Germany, and then referring to the United States, well, they're people I don't usually politically sympathize with. And then I also read this article of Meera Nanda, and she was talking about social movements in India being also being close to post-development, but being used by rural elites as a post-development being used as a mobilizing ideology to basically focus on certain conflicts, namely the conflicts between farmers in general, not differentiated, and the Western corporations like Monsanto. And of course, it's true that Monsanto and the rest of the agribusiness are doing terrible things. But she highlighted that basically the conflicts between wealthy landowners and peasants and landless laborers are then being sidelined. And this and for me, this highlighted, first of all, these dangers of post-development, in the sense that one has to be careful to maybe distinguish between one variant which can lead to a reactionary political stance in the extreme. So basically this was the first change in my thinking about post-development, and the second was more gradual, because at that time I was I was very much concerned with these relations of power, and I thought the first lesson I had learned was about the necessity of intersectionalism, or intersectionality, of basically thinking about multiple relations of oppression and not focusing on only one of them and losing sight of the others. Gender is here, of course, something that few post-development people have actually been talking or writing about a lot. But then the second change was that whereas at that time I was very much concerned with these relations of power, and was something like, okay, you can't really prescribe what kind of model, what kind of development, what kind of society people should pursue. I should try to avoid saying development, because lots of misunderstandings. What kind of society people would like to pursue, and from this perspective, I had doubts about this idea of going back to a vernacular society, as Ranema calls it. And I was more sympathizing with Stephen Marglin and others who were saying, okay, it's not for us to tell the people what they should, how they should live like. They should actually be just be able to choose their own path. But during the next years, I've actually had some second thoughts about this, not only because of the climate crisis, not only because of the increasing imminence of ecological threats and questions, but because reading more about indigenous people, indigenous thought, I found that I looked at relations to nature differently and thought, well, actually, although I'm not a religious person, the idea that we are parts of nature and not lords of nature, the idea that we should act not as if the whole nature and as if all the animals were there for for being exploited by us or eaten by us or whatever. And the idea that that there are interlinkages, interconnections between human beings and all the rest of what the religious people call the creation, resonated more and more with me. And and I found that I became active not only in the political struggles that I had been involved in before, but also in defending forests and against coal mining or motorways, and then and basically coming to the point where I said, well, this with this post-development opposition against the West and the Western models can also have a base not only in indigenous people somewhere across the oceans, but can also have a basis in in the tree huggers that can be found here in Western Europe as well. So so in the end, I also felt myself becoming a bit closer to those radical post-development texts by Esteva and others that I used to be extremely critical about. I'm still a bit critical about them, but but I felt yes, we it's not only a question of relations of power, it's also maybe a question of of feeling spiritually linked to the rest of the beings on this planet. So
and then finally, I just wanted to ask you, because we're also, of course, engaging with the students and reflecting with them. So maybe is there a question that you would want to pose to the students in the course that you think it would be nice for them to reflect further on?
I actually don't have a question in the sense of you should be reflecting on that. I have a question in the sense of I would like to get to know what you're thinking. What is post-development to you, especially if you have actually engaged with this spiritual side of post-development. I'd be very curious about that, because I think I'm still very much on my way and learning and wanting to know how to